Well, in that affirm phase, you're right. It's a big emotional, delta, because we're back at the firm high-fiving, celebrating. Woohoo, we landed the client. We landed the whale. This is going to be an awesome relationship. Meanwhile, they're back at their home with their spouse or their significant other saying, I don't know if I made the right choice. We interviewed 3 different advisors. This is the one we like the best, but this is a big decision. If we got this wrong, we're in trouble, and we're not going to really know we're in trouble until years from now.
Yep.
So the thing you want to do in the affirm phase is give that new client reasons to believe that they made the right choice. What can that look like? It can be as simple as a thank you note, a handwritten thank you note that says, hey, I understand you told us in the interview that or in our conversations, you interviewed 3 other advisors and you chose us. Thank you. Thanks for your trust. Thanks for your focus. Thanks for your commitment to us. We need you to know that even though this relationship is just starting, we're as committed to you. We're as focused as you.
This is the Business of Advice podcast, where we help good advisors become great business owners. I am excited to welcome an old friend, Joey Coleman, to the podcast today. Joey is an award-winning speaker and author, really focused on the idea of customer and now employee retention that we are going to talk about today. What I love about Joey, not only has he spoke at Advisors Excel over the years to our advisors and team, but one thing I like about him a lot is he's worked with some smaller startup companies, but also major brands like Hyatt, Zappos, and NASA. So excited to have him on. We're going to talk about both of his books, the old classic, Never Lose a Customer, but the new one, Never Lose an Employee Again. Joey, it is great to reconnect and see you again. Welcome to the Business of Advice podcast.
Oh, Cody, it is such a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for having me on the show. Love getting the chance to reconnect. And thanks to everybody who's kind enough to listen in today. I'm super excited about our conversation.
Well, and so we're going to talk about 100 days because I know you're really known for that. But before I jump into that, you've got quite the background. I just love to have people share kind of their journey to where they've gotten today. So if you would, just give us kind of the Reader's Digest version of that.
So the Reader's Digest version, Cody, is I've got a crazy eclectic background. So I studied government international relations in college. I went straight to law school where I studied national security law, international law, and litigation. Had the pleasure of working for the United States Secret Service. I worked in the White House Office of Counsel to the President. I worked for the Central Intelligence Agency. I was a criminal defense lawyer. I worked in business consulting. I started and ran my own branding and marketing company for 15 years. And for the last 10 years or so, I've been a full-time professional speaker. Now, some people look at that career, Cody, and they say, geez, Joey can't hold down a job. He's all over the place with all of these positions. But looking back on it, the thread that connects all of them is that in each of those roles, the way you succeeded, the way you excelled was to have a keen understanding of the human condition, like to have a keen understanding of what makes people tick and how can we convince or persuade or encourage the folks we're interacting with to do the things that we'd like them to do, whether that's convince a jury to find my person not guilty, convince a company to buy my consulting engagement, convince a consumer to purchase something from the ad agency I was running, whatever it may be. It's like, how can we create the type of experiences that keep people coming back for more?
So I mentioned you've spoke at AE. I think it was probably, we were talking maybe 2017 or 18. And one of the things I think you really opened everyone's eyes to this idea of what I'm going to call kind of the onboarding process, or what you would call the first 100 days, to the point where so many of our advisors started mapping out. And we're going to talk about that. But you've also now written a new book called Never Lose an Employee Again. And both of these focus on the customer and the employee side on the first 100 days, which has kind of become your brand now. So maybe just, I'll throw out a more generic question, but why this concept of 100 days? And we'll jump into, the customer side of that and the employee side also.
Well, it's interesting, Cody. There's the research reason, and then there's the practical human condition reason. So the research reason why 100 days matters is all the research shows that those first impressions, those initial moments interacting with a brand, whether that's as a customer or as an employee, create the foundation for the relationship going forward. And all the research shows that if you don't get the first 100 days right, you can't have any hope of continuing a long-term relationship. If we look on the customer side, 20 to 70% of customers will quit doing business with you in the first 100 days of becoming a new customer. And when I learned that, I thought, oh my gosh, that's crazy. When I sat down to write the second book, which is all about employee experience, I have to admit, I had this curiosity like, I wonder if the 100 days applies over here too. Logically, it does. But the research shows it does as well. Over 50% of hourly employees quit before day 100. 22% of salaried employees quit in the first 45 days. 4% of employees quit after 1 day on the job. So we've got folks running out the back door as quickly as we're trying to bring them in the front door. And those statistics have only increased post-COVID.
Yeah.
Those numbers are even worse. And so what we came to realize is that the research points to this being important. Now let's talk about the practical human condition. If I go to a leader, whether that's a business owner, a CEO, a manager, and I say, I need you to focus on something every single day for the rest of your career, the likelihood of them doing that is pretty small. Humans, we're not that good at long distance. We're great at short little sprints. But if I say to you, hey, if you lay the foundation in the first 100 days, just 3 months, you can have a customer for years. You can have an employee for years. Suddenly, that becomes more manageable and more attainable. It becomes a goal and a focused effort around onboarding that we can devote the necessary resources and time to give it the attention it deserves without becoming completely overwhelmed in it being a never-ending project.
You know, one of the things I remember just being, I'll say eye-opening for so many of our advisors when you were sharing kind of the 100-day concept was, and this probably applies to a lot of business owners, but very specifically to the advisors that listen to this, is people have made one of the biggest decisions of their life, right? They're trusting this advisor with our advisor specifically. It's kind of their entire nest egg that they've built up for retirement. And that's a big decision to make that decision to trust someone. And just any red flags in those first, couple months are just, they're amplified because they're already a little bit on edge. So taking the opposite approach of that, of just reaffirming that decision constantly, was the big takeaway I remember everyone having, of like, you just want to make sure in those first, 3 months and 10 days
Exactly.
that there's nothing that happens that makes them second guess, like, did we make the right decision? So I know we can't go into every phase, but maybe at a high level, let's start on the customer side of things. You talk about the 8 phases, but one of the others, let's start there. Do you just want to walk them through real quickly the 8 phases, and then they should go buy the book to go in depth on each of those phases, but just what that process looks like?
Sure. So on the customer side, there are 8 phases. They all start with the letter A. And it's kind of like, if you get each of these phases right, it's like getting straight A's from your customers. They love you. They think you're doing a great job. They're excited about the relationship. The first phase is the assess phase. This is when a prospective customer is trying to decide whether or not they want to do business with you. They're checking out your marketing materials. They're listening to your sales pitch. They're going on your website. They're reading testimonials from other customers. They're just getting a feel for who you are and learning, is this the kind of person that's going to help me out? We then come to phase 2, the admit phase. In the admit phase, the customer admits they have a problem that they believe you can help them with. They sign on the dotted line. They hand over their hard-earned cash. They purchase your product or your service. We then immediately transition to phase 3, the affirm phase. In the affirm phase, the customer begins to doubt the decision they just made to do business with you. In common parlance, we call this buyer's remorse.
Yep.
Now, the crazy thing is, Cody, there are very few business leaders and very few listeners on the show today who aren't familiar with the concept of buyer's remorse. But if I were to ask you, do you have a system and a process in your firm, in your practice, to address the buyer's remorse that we scientifically know every client experiences? Most would have to answer no, that they know it's going to happen, but they haven't figured out a way to address it. And that's what you need to do in the affirm stage. You need to reaffirm their decision, to reinstill that confidence they had when they decided that they wanted to work with you. We then come to phase 4, the activate phase. I call it the activate phase because this is the first real moment of truth, and we want to energize the relationship. We want to let this client know that doing business with us is going to be unlike any experience they've ever had. This is that first real moment of truth. If you're in a product business, it's the unboxing experience. And if you're in a service business, it's the kickoff meeting, when you're really off to the races. But then we come to really the second area where most businesses fall apart. First one being that affirm stage. Second one being phase 5, the acclimate phase. This is when a new client gets used to your way of doing business, your cadence of communication, all the steps they need to do to get up and running. The challenge most advisors face is that acclimate phase usually includes a boatload of paperwork. Oh, we're going to have to get your investments from who you used to be with. We got to figure out, get signed up to have you log in for our portal and our accounts and fill out this paperwork, and let's get some tax information. No human on the planet loves paperwork. And yet this is the opening volley to most of our clients. Hey, we're excited to work together. Let's fill out a bunch of paperwork.
Yep.
This is a huge challenge. And as a recovering attorney, right, I want to respect the fact that you've got to do the paperwork. But the paperwork shouldn't feel like a slog through a pit of despair. There are ways to make it interesting. There are ways to make it exciting. We then come to phase 6, the accomplish phase. This is when the client achieves the goal that they had when they originally decided to hire you. Now, many advisors listening might say, well, Joey, the goal is that, when they're in their retirement, they have money to spend and money to live on. Or when they pass away, they've got an inheritance to pass on to their children or their grandchildren. Yes, that is the end all goal. But if we wait to measure or acknowledge any accomplishment until that point, we're probably not going to still be doing business with them, right? Yep. Because too much time has passed. So what are we doing to identify the mini accomplishments, the mini moments of celebration, and the milestones to mark along our journey of this relationship? We then come to phase 7, the adopt phase. This is when the client becomes loyal to us and only us. They're not looking for other advisors. They're focused in on doing business with us. And if, and only if, we get them through those first 7 phases, they become an adopter. They're locked in. They're committed and loyal to us. Do we have the right, the privilege to take them to the final phase, phase 8, the advocate phase, where they become a raving fan singing our praises far and wide. They're writing reviews. They're giving us video testimonials. They're talking to their colleagues and having a party and, other folks that work at their company or other entrepreneurs they know or other leaders they know. And they're saying, oh, you've got to meet my financial advisor. Yeah. They're amazing. That word of mouth marketing is worth its weight in gold. And yet so many advisors try to get those referrals much earlier in the process. If you try to drive advocacy 5 minutes into the relationship, you're not only not going to get it, but you're going to leave that new client feeling skeptical about, wait a second, why would I advocate for you now? You haven't shown me anything.
Yep.
You got to prove that you're able to do this. So those are the 8 phases of the customer journey.
Let me ask you a couple questions about the phases. And this is a very simple one, I guess, but is there one phase or maybe 1 or 2 phases that you feel like are the most important to get right through those 8 phases?
I don't know that I would say, Cody, that 1 or 2 are important to get right, because in my world, they all have kind of equal value. But there are 2 things I will say. Number 1, the phases build on top of each other. And they come in that order, regardless of the size of your practice, regardless of the type of clients you serve. So if you're glossing over one of those phases, you're on shakier ground than you could be if you spent the time to invest in that phase. What I will tell you is there are 2 phases where most firms fall apart. Most firms just aren't cutting it.
Well, that was going to be my second question.
There you go.
Where do people usually get it wrong? So you knew what was coming.
So that would be the affirm phase, that buyer's remorse stage, right after they sign and they begin to doubt the decision they just made. And phase 5, the acclimate phase, where, okay, we're working together, we're excited, and then it turns into paperwork central. Or often it turns into there's not nearly as much communication. When we're in the sales and marketing process, we're whining and dining. We're making friends. It's like dating, right? Everybody's excited. It's new. It's interesting. When we get to the acclimate phase, it's like the honeymoon's worn off a little bit. We're in a relationship. Wait a second. What? You don't bring me flowers. You don't write me love songs. This isn't the kind of relationship that I was anticipating when I agreed to sign on. So what are we doing in that acclimate phase to continue to invest in the relationship and hold that new client's hand while they get used to our way of doing business?
With those two being the two where you see people, and we'll say advisors, but I think in general most businesses mess up or fall down the most. Any ideas in each of those phases of some simple things that they can do? And maybe the affirm one's a big one, right? Especially for advisors, I think oftentimes we don't think about that buyer's remorse kicking in. So just some ideas in those phases of what they can do to fix that or not have it be a bad experience.
Absolutely, Cody. Well, in that affirm phase, you're right. It's a big emotional, delta, because we're back at the firm high-fiving, celebrating. Woohoo, we landed the client. We landed the whale. This is going to be an awesome relationship. Meanwhile, they're back at their home with their spouse or their significant other saying, I don't know if I made the right choice. We interviewed 3 different advisors. This is the one we like the best, but this is a big decision. If we got this wrong, we're in trouble, and we're not going to really know we're in trouble until years from now.
Yep.
So the thing you want to do in the affirm phase is give that new client reasons to believe that they made the right choice. What can that look like? It can be as simple as a thank you note, a handwritten thank you note that says, hey, I understand you told us in the interview that in our conversations, you interviewed 3 other advisors and you chose us. Thank you. Thanks for your trust. Thanks for your focus. Thanks for your commitment to us. We need you to know that even though this relationship is just starting, we're as committed to you. We're as focused as you. Now, most advisors never write thank you notes, let alone before there's kind of a lot to be thankful for.
Mm-hmm.
This is just started. This is just the beginning. That can often get a new client's attention. The other suggestion I would have in this phase is a video that captures the enthusiasm you have for their decision to work with you. And that's a great opportunity, too, to introduce them to the other folks on your team. Hey, everybody, we're in the office and we just heard that you decided to sign with our firm. We are so excited to be working for you. Let me take you a quick round. Look, and you come through the offices and you're like, oh, hey, I'm Joey. I'm going to be working with you on your tax issues. Super excited to meet you in person. Oh, hi, I'm Brenda. I'm the one who's going to be scheduling your meetings with Cody. He's going to be working with you and he's going to be great to work with. And don't worry, I'm going to make sure that you get in to see him as anytime you need to, and that we're regularly bringing you what you need. And you just kind of go through the team. And now they're feeling like, oh, wait, I only interviewed with one person. Now I feel like there's a whole team supporting me. Now I feel like there's a bunch of people. That boosts their confidence that they matter. Cody, if there's one thing I know about all human beings on the planet, is that we are dying for proof that we matter. We want to matter to our spouse. We want to matter to our kids. We want to matter to our coworkers. We want to matter to our friends. If as advisors, we can show these people that they matter to us, we immediately move into the rarefied air of the people they know care about them. We like to think there's lots of people that care about us, but as our advisor, we can give them proof that we care about them, and that transcends the relationship.
That's good. Hey, you said something subtle there that I picked up on because I've read your books and I've heard you speak, but you mentioned the thank you note, then you mentioned a video. I know one of the things that you're a huge proponent of that I'd love you to just talk about is communicating through through different mediums during this process also. So just share the value and importance of that.
Well, I think most businesses, Cody, over-index on 1 or 2 forms of communication. Maybe you're an email house, so everything you do is send in emails. Maybe you're a little old school, you're phone-based. You're like, I like to just call and talk to my clients. The thing is, if we only use one tool of communication with our clients, we're only creating one type of experience. And the crazy thing we're up against in the environment we live in today, the modern era, is that our clients are being bombarded with different types of communication in different types of mediums of message and different frequencies of communication. So our opportunity is to look at the 6 communication tools, which I define as in-person interactions, emails, physical mail, snail mail, sending somebody something in the post, the OG inbox, as I like to call it, phone calls, videos, and gifts. And if we look at those 6 tools, even just me running through that list, somebody listening might go, oh, I never really thought about doing videos for individual clients. We do videos for our marketing. We've got our website has videos, but I've never sent a one-off video to a client. Well, there's an opportunity to explore. Or, mail. Let's see. We send an annual holiday card. and we send their statements, but we really never use the mail for anything other than that. I don't know about you, Cody, but when I go to the mailbox still today and there's a handwritten note, there's an unexpected package, I get a little spring in my step. I'm like, oh, what's this? Who decided to send me something? It doesn't take a lot to move the dial in terms of the experience you're creating for your clients. And when you alternate the communication tool you're using or the way you're delivering your message, you alter the level of experience that that client is having and what they associate with their relationship with you.
Yeah, it's good. I think I think one of the big takeaways was the mail aspect, right? It's so rare today that it's a way to really stand out. You know, everything's become so electronic and digital. To be able to get something in the mail is just a simple way. And I think you said it best, right? A thank you, handwritten thank you card is just a huge difference maker.
Absolutely. Cody, I'll do a little experiment for everyone listening, and hang in there, folks, because I can't see you. But let's just do a quick little experiment. And I'll do it with Cody, and you play along as well. Cody, have you received any handwritten thank you notes in the last year?
Yes.
Okay, great. Do you still have those notes?
I do.
Interesting. What did you just receive that note yesterday, or did you receive it a while ago?
A while ago.
A while ago, but you still have it. Now, folks, I want you to think, have you received any thank you notes in the last year? And if the answer is yes, well, first of all, if the answer is no, it lets you know what a huge opportunity there is to send thank you notes. Okay, all the businesses you've done business with, you haven't received a single thank you note. If that's the case, it shows just how open this market is for you. But let's say you have received a thank you note. Statistically, you received it a while ago and you still have it. Why? Because it is physical proof that you matter. It's tangible evidence that someone cared enough about you to put pen to paper, to put it in the mail, to have you receive it, open it, read it. You remember who wrote it. You remember what it said, and yet you kept it. The reason most people keep thank you notes is it's proof that they matter. We also feel a little guilty about throwing something away that's handwritten, right? That adds in there too.
Yep.
But more importantly, most leaders I know have kind of a little file of the notes they've received over the years that if they're having a bad day, if they're not feeling like they're making the impact they want to make, they can go to that file and kind of get a little boost up, feel a little bit better about their situation. Your clients are the exact same way. They're humans. It costs you less than $2, postage included, to have a handwritten note and to mail it to someone. And they will keep it for weeks, months, even years. I don't know about you. I don't know of any marketing investment or any relationship development investment that is that inexpensive, requires that little time to create, but has that significant of a lasting impression.
Yeah, that's good. It's a simple one. So hopefully everyone starts writing thank yous if they're not. Let me transition that a little. Let's say someone's listening. They say like, hey, we've got to improve this customer journey. You're a huge proponent of mapping out what that customer journey looks like. Will you just talk through, and maybe you can even use an example. I know you've shared some examples of companies that have done this well in the past, but what would that look like to really map out your customer journey and figure out how to make positive impacts along that journey?
Well, Cody, I love this question because I think this is the place that every organization needs to start.
Yep.
Before we can figure out what we can make better, let's first look at what are we doing now? And I have done this exercise on all 7 continents with audiences of variety of different sizes and across every industry you would imagine. And here's what happens when we map the journey across those 8 phases that I referenced. We get to the end of the mapping exercise where we're just showing, hey, and then we send them this email, then we send them this letter, then they receive this phone call. We're just placing the existing touch points on the map. We get to the end, and invariably, there are shocked faces in the audience. And they're shocked for a couple of reasons. Many folks are going, I only deal with my little department, my little piece. I didn't know that we were having all these other interactions. Or maybe I didn't know that no one else was doing anything in the journey except me. Or you have leaders that say, why This isn't the way we're supposed to be doing it. This isn't the way we did it when we established our systems and processes. What's happening? Why aren't we doing it anymore? Oh, well, we decided to stop doing it because your people weren't attached to the reason that you had that touch point. The reason we sent an annual birthday card to the client, the reason we called them whenever the market dropped by more than 5%, just to say, hey, I know you're probably freaking out. Just hang in there. It's all good. Don't worry. Do. If our employees aren't connected to the reasons for our communication, we can't expect them to deliver on those communications in a meaningful way. So when we do that mapping exercise, we not only learn what's not working or what's missing, but we start to realize how many opportunities there are to enhance the overall experience we're delivering for our clients.
Yeah, great place for people to start if they haven't done that. Let me ask a little different question. So you've mapped that out. Maybe you have this process that you've had in place for a while. I would say the world is changing quickly. Expectations that customers have continue to evolve. How does a business adapt and stay ahead of those, let's say, changing or consistently elevating standards of expectations that a customer has?
Cody, I think we need to map and remap and remap and remap. What I mean by that is, even as a guy who teaches this, we've got a call next week. So we're recording this and we're going to do a call in the month of December. I say we, my team, where we look at the Joey Coleman experience with my clients like we do every December. And we look at what worked, what didn't work. What are the expectations? Do we need to start doing TikToks? By the way, no, I'm not going to start doing TikToks, right? It's as important to say what you're not going to do as it is to say what you are going to do. Where are we going to be doubling down in the year to come? We're going to be doubling down on handwritten letters. We're going to be doubling down on hyper-personalized gifts. We're going to be doubling down on customized video shot on the fly. What do I mean by that? Me walking through an airport, because I spend most of my time traveling around the world giving speeches. Me walking through the airport saying, hey, Cody, I'm walking here through the Detroit airport. I just saw something that made me think of you and the advisors you serve, blah, blah, blah. That little 2 to 3 minute video that ideally when Cody receives that, he goes, holy cow, Joey's thinking of me. Joey just gave me an interesting idea that I can apply with the advisors I serve. Man, maybe I should think about working with Joey again. Maybe I should be referring people to Joey. Maybe I should have him come speak to people, whatever it may be. My reason for doing it is not necessarily to drive new business, although I know that will happen. My reason for doing these type of things is to continue to double down into the relationships and the friendships. And the reality is, we talked about the first 100 days. The first 100 days are absolutely important, but that doesn't mean on day 101 you get to stop caring. It may mean you don't have to reach out every day. It may mean you can start to space your communications. It may mean you can move towards some things that are a little more systematized or automated, but you've got to keep in that ongoing communication if you want to build those long-term relationships.
Joey, is there a process you use to evaluate, like what you're talking about, this December process? How are you evaluating what worked, what didn't, what you should change, what you should adjust? Any thoughts or advice around that?
We're doing a couple of things. Number one, we're just sitting down with the team and doing the map.
Yep.
Again, just reminding everyone, hey, this is what we do. And then I'm asking the team, well, which of these things do you think worked well? Which of these things didn't work well? My assistant came to me the other day in anticipation of this thing, and she said, hey, Joey, 2 things. Number one, I'm pulling some responses that have come in over the last year when we did certain things and people responded well. So we sent a certain email that led to a lot of responses, or we sent a couple gifts in the mail that we got thank you notes for thank you notes. That's an interesting metric to track. How often have you gotten a thank you note for a thank you note? That's how you know you've given a really meaningful thank you note, when the person has to acknowledge it. Don't write a thank you note for the thank you note, but if you get one,
that was a good thank you
That's
note.
a good thank you note. And you might want to look at, well, what was different about that one? What did I refer to? What were the points I was making? When did it come in the sequence of the relationship? And so kind of looking at those things, I think you've got the ability to not only look to your team and get input on what's working or not working operationally. You might be doing some things that your team's like, we're just overwhelmed trying to do this for everyone. And now it becomes that they're just dialing it in and you're not getting the result you thought you were getting. It might be better to say, hey, instead of doing this special touch point for every client, maybe we only do it for every 10th client. And now it's like, oh, we can put the intentionality and the focus behind it deserves. But then also looking to any feedback you've actually gotten from your clients as to what's working or not working, what they say to you. One of the things I take great pride in as a speaker is working with meeting planners who say, Joey, I've been doing this for 20 years. There are two things about you that are incredibly unique. Number one, we've never worked with a speaker who has as high of energy as you. And we've never worked with a speaker who is as easy to work with. So when I bring that data back to my team, we say, okay, what can we do to ramp up the energy even more? There are logistical things. When is Joey flying in? How much sleep do I get the night before? So there's business operation things that allow me to deliver on that energy. But then the ease of working with, that's an interesting one too. We know that everyone who books me for a speech is going to ask for promo photos that they can use in the program or on the website to promote. Well, what if we sent those before they asked for them? Oh, that might be different. What if we were creating regular custom photos? A lot of speakers send one photo. We send 50. Not because I expect you to use all 50 photos, but I want the meeting planner to be able to go, our meeting colors are purple and yellow. And then they see Joey in a purple shirt and they're like, oh, we can use this photo because it aligns with our brand. I don't care what color the shirt is that I'm showing. But if you start to think about, well, what would make it easier? What would make it faster? What would make it more convenient? Now you're able to continue to enhance your game year after year in a way that your clients say, I want to just keep working with this person.
There were three words there. You said easier, faster, more convenient, right? Which are just, if you think about a customer journey, anything you could do to accomplish those three things is going to be a huge win. You mentioned another thing there at the end, and I was going to ask this question, so perfect segue to that. So much of what you have talked about so far and the book talks about is like that first 100 days as they become a new client. But you mentioned how would you take the same principles of what you're teaching and apply those to the lifetime customer journey?
So I think I liken this stuff, Cody, to dating. Okay, I've been happily married now for 13 years. But the reason I've been happily married for 13 years is I tried to bring the same level of focus and intentionality and uniqueness that I brought in the first few months of dating. The unexpected note, the unexpected flowers, just showing up because. Hey, it's a Thursday. Let's go on a date Thursday night instead of Friday night. Hey, is there a little message or a thing I can have show up on Sunday morning? It's trying to look at how can I continue to bring the same level of energy and enthusiasm and excitement to somebody I've been in a relationship for a while. On top of that, every business has anniversaries. You have the anniversary of when someone became a client. Now, here's the interesting thing. Most clients won't remember when they started. Some will, but most won't. But if you remember, that is a built-in time to reach out to them every year and say, hey, I know it's not your wedding anniversary. I know it's not the anniversary of your birth or the anniversary of one of your children's birth, but you know what it is the anniversary of? When you first became a client. You've been with us now for 10 years. We really want to celebrate that, or 2 years, or 12 years, or 30 years, or 5 years. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you acknowledge the passing of time and that you appreciate that they continue to be a client and you're going to continue to up your game in the relationship.
That's good. Okay, let's transition it a little bit, and I'll give a big shout out to Brittany Hodak and John Rulin both. I'd had them on, and they both said, I don't even know if they said it on the podcast or if it was us talking before or after, but they're like, have you read Joey's new book? Like, dude, you've got to check this book out. So the new one's Never Lose an Employee Again. So I'll say some of the same principles of what does it look like as you onboard a new customer as to what does it look like as you're onboarding a new employee. But before maybe I even jump into that. What made you write this book? Like, why this one today?
Well, Cody, for years, I've been known as a customer experience guy, a client experience guy.
Yep.
And I had been in that world of helping companies deliver remarkable client experiences for about all of 5 minutes before I realized that you can't have a remarkable client experience if you don't have a remarkable employee who will deliver that experience to the client. And so I realized pretty early on, we need great employees, and we need our employees to be symbiotic in the relationship with the customer and the experiences we're trying to create. The problem is, in most organizations, client experience or customer experience and employee experience are two totally different topics in different silos in the organization. You know, customer experience, client experience, that's the purview of the advisor and, you know, the marketer and the sales team and those type of folks. Employee experience is HR, if you're big enough to have an HR department, or if you're not big enough to have an HR department, it's somebody haphazardly doing the HR when it's necessary and needed. These two things are actually two sides of the same coin, because as we improve client experience, we necessarily make it more fun to work there as an employee. As we have better employee experiences and our people come to work with a spring in their step and excited to work, they're going to create better experiences for our client. And then we've also experienced the downside of the two sides of the same coin. We walk into a place and it's clear that the employees hate working there. We know we're about to have a horrible customer experience, right? These things are in sync. And so when I started to look at how do we deliver consistent client experiences, it became clear that we needed to have the same conversation about what are the experiences we're creating for our employees to be able to deliver those experiences.
Have you seen, or can you talk about the link between, if you want a very customer-centric culture, how this onboarding and the experience you provide for the employees like sets the table for that?
Absolutely. I mean, there's the data conversation, and then there's just the logical, you know, let's think about this for a minute. So let's start with the logical this time, and then we'll come back to the data. It only stands to reason that if we're saying to our employees, we want you to care about our customers, we want you to look out for them, we want you to take care of them, and then we treat them poorly, they're like, well, which is it that you want? You know, because I'm confused. You want me to go above and beyond for our customer, and we pull out all the stops. We'll spend any amount of money to overnight ship something. We'll move things around on the schedule to accommodate their schedule. We'll shift meetings around. But I ask you if I can have an hour and a half for lunch because my kid has their school program over the lunch hour and I got to commute to and from the school. And so I'm asking for 30 minutes later. When I tell you I'll give you 30 minutes at 5 o'clock to stay later, and we've got bosses that are like, nah, you got to put in for a vacation day. It's like, wait a second, we make all these accommodations for our customers, but you won't make this tiny little accommodation once a year for me as an employee? It's just illogical. So we immediately know that just as human beings, we should pay attention to this. Now, on the data side, there's some really interesting research that was just shared by Tiffany Bova in her newest book, The Experience Mindset, which actually draws the specific correlation and causation between happier employees lead to more revenue from customers because customers like doing business with you better. But again, we can also think to the data from our own lives. Think of a restaurant that you love going to. Why do you love going there? Well, probably because the food is good and it's consistent. But I'd be willing to bet that more importantly, the ambiance, the environment, the wait staff, the people you interact with, that's the reason you go again and again. I mean, the food's got to be good. Don't get me wrong. The product always has to meet a minimum base level of experience. But what usually moves the dial is the humans that we interact with. We've got a sushi place here in Minnesota that we go to. My two boys, when we walk in for sushi, the first question they ask the maitre d' while we're being seated is Jack working tonight? Now, the reason they ask, is Jack working tonight, is Jack is their favorite waiter. And they want to be placed in Jack's section so that they can talk to Jack. Now, I didn't tell my boys to pay attention to this. My boys are 8 and 10. They're kids. But they know that Mr. Jack when he waits on them, does funny little things with the chopsticks and knows their order, what special, type of sushi they're looking for. And he'll say to my youngest, "Oh, tamago again." And my youngest is like, "Oh, he remembers me. He knows me." Stop and think about the impressions being. Now, don't get me wrong. The sushi's delicious.
Yep.
But Jack makes the experience. The same can be said of any business, of any firm, of any advisor's organization that you're listening here. It's the people that are going to be the thing that everyone raves about. Not, "Oh, well, we were able to get an extra 0.5% from our investments this year than we thought we were going to get." That's important. That's valuable. But that's not going to keep people coming back for more and singing your praises far and wide as a raving advocate fan.
That's good. I have people ask me all the time why we spend maybe so much time or effort on the culture here. And I've always said it's a simple philosophy that if people enjoy coming to work, I just believe they'll do a better job creating a great experience for our clients, which is what we're trying to do. And so when I started reading the book, I'm like, oh man, it's just speaking my language here. One of the things you talk about, maybe you can hit on this, because I think a lot of times, and we won't go through the phases because you've broke it out kind of in the same phases that you do the customer journey. But I think something that a lot of people probably don't think about is the pre-hiring process. So not just, okay, they've said yes. Can you talk about maybe some of the things that you feel like a lot of businesses could improve before the employee says yes to joining your firm? So kind of pre-hiring and the work that has to go in there.
Cody, absolutely. And just for those folks that maybe aren't making the connection as seamlessly as Cody just did, the same 8 phases that apply to your customers apply to your employees, with one minor distinction. You might remember that phase 2 on the customer side, I called it the admit phase, where the customer admits they have a problem and they decide that they're going to buy your product or service. In the employee context, we call that the accept phase, because in that phase, the employee accepts your job offer, signs on the dotted line and says, "I'm going to come work with you." It's the same behavior. It's the same interaction. It's just a slight shift in the behaviors. When we think about what happens on an employee context, most leaders will say, well, we got to make sure that, once they get here, we get them trained and we get them up to speed. But they don't spend nearly as much time thinking about what are all the communications and interactions we're having before they show up for the first day on the job. And if we look at those 8 phases, there are 3 of them. There's the assess phase, where the prospective employee is checking out the About Us page on our website or the careers page on our website. And some of the advisors are listening are going, we don't actually have one of those pages. Newsflash, folks, get one of those pages. What's it like to work for you? And you might say, well, Joey, we haven't hired anyone in a while. We've never needed that before. Well, that's what your competition has. And by the way, your competition is not the other advisors in your town. That's a big, important thing that has shifted dramatically in the last 50 years. It used to be that your employer was located somewhere within 30 miles of your house. Now, if your employer is located within 30 miles of your house, it tells me that you didn't make a very wide search net as an employee, or your employer didn't make a very wide search net in terms of who they were looking for in terms of candidates. I'm not saying it's bad, but what I am saying is the top employers on the planet right now are hiring people in every country on every continent in the world.
Yep.
Boundaries don't matter anymore in this world of remote work. And so that's what you're up against. But in that assess phase, what are you doing to show what it's actually like to come work for you? In that accept phase, what does your job offer look like? Is it a form letter written by an attorney? Or is it an invitation to the next chapter of your life? Stop and think about the greatest wedding invitation you ever received. And I imagine everybody who's listening is old enough to remember at some point receiving what I like to call the Russian nesting doll of mail, where you get the envelope and you open the envelope and there's an envelope inside of that one, and you open that envelope and there's an envelope inside of that one, and there's maybe tissue paper, there's raised lettering. It's we request the favor of your reply, come to these amazing nuptials. You're looking at the invitation and you're going, this is going to be an epic event. This is going to be amazing. This is going to be a great party. This is where I want to be. Contrast that to the typical offer letter. Thank you for interviewing with us, Cody. We're excited to extend you the offer of junior advisor. We will be paying you X dollars per year. These are your benefits. This is how you qualify for the plans. By the way, we're going to have a probationary period of 90 days before you qualify for anything. You're only going to get this. You're only going to get, by the way, we're an at-will employer, so we can fire you anytime we like. Sign on the bottom line. Come see us. We're excited to work with you. Like, this is just, we need to look at the way we're communicating these messages to recognize or at least take advantage of the significance that these communications and interactions could have. And then last but not least, while a lot of folks may have heard of buyer's remorse, most folks haven't considered new hires remorse. It's the exact same thing as buyer's remorse, but it's applying to a newly hired employee. I'll close my rant on this with some brand new research from Gartner. Gartner looked at 3,000 people who accepted job offers in Q1 of this year. 3,000 people. And they went to them on what was supposed to be their first day on the job and said, how was the first day? And what they found is that 50% of the people who had accepted the job offer didn't show up for the first day because they had accepted another job offer in the intervening time between when they accepted the first one and when they were supposed to start. 50%. That's staggering. This is the world we live in as employers and hiring people. But then they went to the people who did show up for the first day and they said, so what are you thinking about your new job and this new position? 47% said they would be willing to consider a different offer for another company that day. So we do the math here and we say 50% didn't even show up for the first day, and 47% of the ones who did show up for the first day said, I'd be willing to go elsewhere. This is the landscape of hiring in this era. If you're not paying attention to what happens before the first day on the job, you're not going to have people showing up for the first day on the job.
That's good. One other question I want to ask, because I think a challenge, and then I want to jump into these lightning round questions. I think a challenge for a lot of, I'll say small business owners, right? And a lot of our advisors would fall into that category, is they don't have the time or resources to maybe train a new employee as they come on. So that doesn't necessarily always look great. It's something we're trying to help them a ton with and building out a ton of tools. But like, just any advice on what that like kind of first day, first week needs to look like, and just some things they need to be aware of?
Yeah, Cody, I could rant on this for days, but let me share a couple of general thoughts. So let's look at the research. The research shows that north of 50% of employers spend less than 1 week onboarding new hires. Let me get this right. You want them to stay for months or years, and you're willing to spend a whole week invested in getting them up to speed? This idea of let's push them into the deep end and let them swim is a flawed premise. Yep. We don't do it in any other area of our lives, but we think it's acceptable with employees. It's ridiculous. When employers say to me, well, Joey, I don't have the time to train them, then you don't have the right to keep them. You've got to make the time. You've got to get them involved. But here's where most leaders feel overwhelmed. They say, how am I going to teach this new hire everything they need to know to succeed? You're not.
Yeah.
Release that need. Release that expectation. And instead, I like to approach it with a model I call 3-2-1. Okay? 3-2-1. So when you take an employee on one, let's say it's their second day on the job, what are the 3 things that I want you to know? Only 3. The problem is most new employers, when they're interacting with new hires, will just flood them with, oh, and you need to know this, and you need to do this. And by the way, if this random weird thing happens, this is how we handle it. And you talk about something that has happened twice in the history of your firm, but that's in your onboarding discussion? No, completely unnecessary. 3 things. When you go home tonight, what 3 things do you need to know? We then come to the 2 things. What are 2 things that I want you to feel? I want you to feel confident. I want you to feel successful. I want you to feel aware. What are the emotions I want you to feel on that day? 3 things to know, 2 things to feel, and 1 thing to do. What is the 1 thing I want you to do to anchor in the 3 things you learned and the 2 ways you felt.
That's good.
I want you to send an email to a client. I want you to call and schedule an appointment. I want you to prepare a deck for a client pitch we're going to have. 3, 2, 1. When we boil all the things we could teach a new employee down into these small bite-sized modules, 3, 2, 1, we now realize that we actually have months of training that we can do with them. And we might only need to spend 15 to 20 minutes a day. So many leaders are like, oh, I'm going to have to quit doing any work for 4 days while I train this new person. No, they don't want to have you sit with them for 4 days. They would rather have you say, hey, I'm going to spend 30 minutes with you this morning, and then we're going to check in for 10 minutes at about 2 p.m. Here are the 3 things I want you to focus on today. Here are the 2 feels you don't have to tell them, right? Those what you're trying to create. And here's the one thing I want you to do based on the 3 things you just learned. And then let them rinse and repeat. Let them get some reps. Let them learn it. And then once we've learned that thing, great. Tomorrow, we'll go to the next piece of the puzzle. Now we've scheduled the meeting. How do we prepare the agenda for the meeting? All right, here's how we think about that. Here's the template. Here's our system. And now we're actually investing in the employee over time instead of fire hosing them with information on the first or second day.
Yeah, that's good, because one of the things I've learned too over the past 19 years is they don't. If you try and fire hose them, they're not going to. It's also new, the lingo, the language, especially in the financial services world. Like most of, they're just trying to figure out what it means. So I love that approach of like bite-sized chunks. Okay, I said we're going to jump to lightning round. Let me ask you one final question though before we jump into that. Mainly because we're recording this at the end of the year. It's going to come out at the end of the year. As business owners are doing kind of their year-end planning, reflection, are there a couple just key questions you think they should ask about the client experience and the employee experience just as they're evaluating that?
Absolutely. So a couple things that I think are great for a team meeting where you get everybody together for the end of the year. Get everybody together for, maybe a half an hour. And this is what you say. What is the best experience we created for a client this year? And make everyone answer, regardless of where they are in the organizational hierarchy. What is the best, most remarkable experience we created for one of our customers, one of our clients this year? Question number 2, what is the worst client experience we created for either one, or what is often the case, many of our customers, our clients, over the course of this year? And then question number 3, what is one thing that we didn't do this year that we should do next year as it relates to our clients? And this can come back to that ease, efficiency, convenience, speed, some of those metrics we talked about earlier. But it could also just be, hey, there's this annoying thing we should do. We should stop making them do it. Or it could be, we have people asking all the time, can I get this paperwork I need for my taxes? Could we give it to them before they ask? What are the things we could do to make their life better? So what's something we did that was remarkable? What was something we did that was not at all remarkable, that was horrible? And what is one thing we're going to do differently next year?
That's good.
We can ask the exact same questions when we meet and talk about our team members. Hey, who is the employee that we delivered a remarkable experience for this year? Who is the employee that we're taking for granted that we didn't do good stuff for? And what is one thing we're going to do next year to make every employee love coming to work? There's this country music legend by the name of Bonnie Raitt. And she has this great song called Let's Give Them Something to Talk About, right? I like to think when I'm looking at my own employees' experience, when they are hanging out with their family over the holidays and their family says, so how's work going? Because we know that's going to happen. When we get together with our loved ones and they're of a certain age, how's your job? How's school? We want to know what's going on in their life. How do I want my people to answer? What are the stories I want them to tell? What are the things I want them to say about working with Joey, not working for Joey? Nobody works for me. Everybody works with me. That's a big distinction that's really important for me and my team. And I want them to know, I want them to have evidence, proof points, multiple proof points throughout the year of Joey thinks we work together. I work with him. Here are the things Joey does to make my experience better. And some of these are big things, but I actually strive for lots of little things. I strive for, oh, he knew I was having a bad day and he sent flowers. Or, oh, he knew that, I had worked really hard on this project and he called me out in front of the client and sang my praises to the client. Or, oh, he knew that, this was a really tough go and and that I had dropped the ball on something that I had failed. And he sent me a personal audio message or personal video that was like, look, we're not curing cancer here. I know it's a mistake and we're going to figure out the mistake, but don't beat yourself up over the weekend. These things happen. I make mistakes too. Let's just make sure we don't make it again. How are we taking these interactions with our team members and making them into moments, magical moments, where we either reinforce our core values, we teach them something new, we show them the kind of employer that we are, we acknowledge the type of human that they are. It's not that this stuff is hard, but it does require our effort and it does require our intentionality. Last thing I'll say on this, Cody, if you'll indulge me, any leaders listening out, so CEOs, heads of the advisory, anybody who's got other people that report to them, here's something you can do that I imagine you might not have done in a long time. Get a note, a blank card for every single employee you have, and write them a card here at the end of the year, telling them specifically 2 or 3 things they did this year that moved the dial for you. 2 or 3 things that saved the day, that allowed you to be the advisor you want to be, that allowed the firm to reach goals, that saved a situation that could have gotten a lot worse. And be specific. Not, hey, we love having you work here, but you know what, Cody? Having you work here is a game changer every single day. And let me talk about a couple of examples this year where you really changed the game. Boom, boom, boom. Detailed, specific examples. Handwrite it and put it in the mail to them. That investment is the same investment we talked about with the thank you note, but it's for your team. I promise you.
That's great.
It is probably the case they've never received a note like that from their employer at the end of the year, no matter how long they've been in business, no matter how many different jobs they've worked over the years.
Yeah, that is great. Hopefully everyone listens and does that. I have to admit, I just see this vision of you doing a TikTok dance to that Bonnie Raitt song, though. So if you do incorporate TikTok, maybe that's
I'll be ready to go.
That's the first one. Okay,
I love it.
Let's hit these lightning round questions real quick. Just can be simple answers here at the end. Going back to, let's say, the start of COVID, I think every leader has kind of rethought things. But is there a lesson that you feel like you learned over these past few years that you're going to carry forward for the rest of your life?
Oh, boy, Cody, so many lessons. But because it's a lightning round, I'll just focus in on one. Make time to make the in-person interactions matter. One thing we did, and I'll talk about something we did in my family. My wife implemented during COVID weekly game night. We do a board game 1 night a week. I've got 2 young boys, as I mentioned, to 8 and 10. The whole family plays. We've done that every week during COVID. When COVID ended, we've kept it going.
That's cool.
We created a family ritual about making memories. And when my boys have their first win over mom and dad, because we don't play this game of like, oh, we're going to just set this up so you can win. No, everybody's playing full out, competitive. When they get that first win against mom and dad, when they get that first win against big brother, these are memories that we are cementing in based on making those in-person interactions matter.
That's cool. What's your go-to board game?
Oh, there are so many. Though the one my boys love playing is a game called Splendor, which is really big in Silicon Valley. It's for an older crowd than 8 and 10, but they love it. That's a favorite.
Cool. Okay. Second question. What is the one thing that you did that graduated you from being good to great?
Oh, continuing to hone the craft, even when I was getting the accolades that I could have rested on.
Yep.
As a speaker, my 10,000 hours, now 20,000 hours are on stage. I'm never done. If I'm not thinking before every speech, how can I make this not only the best speech everyone in this audience has ever seen, but the best speech I've ever given? the day I stop having that bar is the day that I should stop holding microphones.
You know, one of the things I love about you and so many people I look up to is just this drive to constantly get better. So that's a good segue for my third question. Is there something new that you're doing this year to drive your own personal growth that you're excited about? Or maybe we're at the end of the year, so something next year you're looking forward to doing.
Yeah. So next year, I am going to be pushing into an entirely new business. So for years, I have been speaking, and for years, I've had private speaking clients, CEOs, Olympic athletes, Olympic gold medalists who would come to me and say, Joey, I want some help with my speaking. I know that you're a speaker. In 2024, I'm formally launching speaker training and speaker mastermind programs for speakers for people that want to be speakers, for speakers that want to take their business to the next level. Because, and Cody, I know you're a big fan of this, when you teach it, you get better at it.
Yep.
And when you teach it, you learn as much. My theory is if I'm not learning as much from the students, I'm not paying attention. And we did some experiments with this with my good buddy, Philip McKernan, last year, and we had great success. And our plan is to really double down on it in 2024. So I'm excited to be around speakers, to be working on speaking, and frankly, building the next bench of great speakers. You know, there's lots of audiences out there that need to hear great messages, and I'm happy and excited to work with folks to get the message out of their head, through their mouth, and into the ears of the audience.
That's good. Looking forward to that. Okay, fourth question. Can't be one of your two awesome books, but what is the book that you've recommended most to other entrepreneurs?
Oh, interesting. So I'm going to take this I'm going to deviate from what I imagine is maybe a typical answer. I recommend that all entrepreneurs read one fiction book for every nonfiction book they read. Now, some will say, oh, Joey, I just don't like nonfiction. Here's the thing, folks. Reading fiction, right? I get a lot of people like, I read nonfiction, I'm growing my business. Reading fiction helps you understand people. Reading nonfiction helps you understand business and process. Reading fiction helps you understand humans. And I don't care whether you're dealing with your customers or dealing with your employees or your spouse or your kids or your neighbor, your significant other, or the coworker or whoever it is, we've got to increase our ability to understand other humans. And I have found the best pathway for that is to read fiction. And now, as I might anticipate, well, Joey, what's a fiction book that you might recommend? And this one not only has been hugely interesting for me, and I really enjoyed it. But it's one that, given my background and some of the things that I did growing up with traveling the world, it really resonated. The book is called A Gentleman in Moscow, and it's a fiction book written by Amor Towles. I think I'm pronouncing his name right. As my buddy Ryan Holiday says, it's always a challenge when the first time you learn a name is you read it, you create your own pronunciation. But the book is called A Gentleman in Moscow, and it's this story, and I'm not giving anything away. It's basically a story of this guy who lives in a hotel in Moscow for decades. And it's a story of all the people that come to the hotel and interact with him in the hotel. And it's just really fascinating, and it's curious. So read more fiction.
Well, that makes me feel good because I stayed up too late last night reading a new David Baldacci book. Because I actually have to discipline myself to read nonfiction. I would read fiction all day, every day if I could. But
well, maybe that's why you're so good with people, Cody. I've always admired your ability to build cultures and interact with people. And I think reading fiction, that's what drives it.
I like it. Okay, final question. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Oh, again, I've been so fortunate to have so many mentors, and so many people have just showered me with wisdom and what they've learned over the years. I'm going to go with a piece of advice that I got from my great-grandmother, who lived to be 107 years old. She almost lived in 3 centuries. Wow. She just missed by about a year and a half living in 3 different centuries. 107 years old. And one day when she was about 105, she said to me, Joey, the first 100 years are the hardest. And that perspective of there's still more time. The thing that we're worried about and worked up about today, it is highly likely that a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, we're not even going to remember this moment. What can we do to drive to the present What can we do to do our best every day without a lot of worry for, well, how will this play out in the future? Or how will it play out in the past? Just giving ourselves the grace to say, I'm in the hardest part of life, the first 100 years. So just keep moving forward. It's okay. Just keep plodding through it. I find that it helps me not take things too seriously when I remember that quote.
That's great. I love it. Okay, my friend, I appreciate you taking the time. It was good to reconnect and looking forward to doing some more stuff together here in the future. I've held up the books a few times for those watching online, but they should go pick both of those up. Never lose a customer again, never lose an employee again. What are the other ways for the audience to stay connected with you?
Well, the best place to find me, Cody, is on my website, joeycoleman.com. That's Joey, like a baby kangaroo or a 5-year-old, Coleman, Coleman, like the camping equipment, but no relation, joeycoleman.com. Both of the books have bonuses that you can access online. There's videos, things like that. And if there's any way that I can support anybody listening with either client experience or employee experience, don't hesitate to reach out. There's free resources on my website. There's videos. I'm all about raising the bar on experience globally, and anything I can do to help you create more remarkable experiences is something that I would love to explore doing.
That's awesome, Joey. I appreciate it. This is one of those episodes that you need to make sure that you're sharing with your team and encouraging them to listen to also. So, Joey, I appreciate the time and good to see you again, my friend.
Thanks, Cody. And thanks to everybody who listened in today. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did.